Hello, everyone. It's Miss Madelyn. I am back to share with you all my thoughts about our Bible story. So, this story about Jesus healing the man who'd been born blind was actually one of my favorite Bible stories when I was a kid. Whenever my grandmother would come over, we would share this children's Bible. We used the Beginner's Bible, and we would often read this story because I liked it so much. So for a long time, I knew this story as Open Eyes. I actually thought that was the name of this story until finally, when I was older, I read the full story in a full Bible. And anyway, I just loved how in this particular story, how Jesus made some mud using his own spit nonetheless, and then how he put the mud on the man's eyes. And I'm pretty sure when I was a kid, I reacted with kind of like a ew kind of way, thinking about the mud and it being on the man's eyes and stuff. But then just this really incredible miracle happens of how after the man washes in the pool, he then realizes he's able to see. And he's able to see for the first time in his entire life. I just thought that was so cool. What an amazing example of God's power and God's love. And, it's kind of like, the man was washing off not only, the mud, but it was like he was literally washing away his blindness. Of course, it wasn't the water in the pool that healed him. It was Jesus who healed this man. Now, one of the reasons that I think this particular story is so important is because it is in this story that Jesus basically explains why this man was born blind. Now, if you remember at the beginning of the story, Jesus' disciples had asked Jesus not just why this man was born blind, but they kind of assumed that they already know why. You see, back during Jesus' time, most people believed that any kind of unusual trouble or sufferings or a lot of people's physical differences like blindness or deafness or people who had trouble walking or could not walk, as well as other physical differences, most people believed that these things were caused either by a person or any one of their past family members having done something wrong and therefore caused this trouble, this struggle, this suffering, or that God was punishing them for some kind of a past wrong. And in this story, we see Jesus' disciples assuming that this man must have done something wrong or that his parents had done something wrong, and that those wrongs had either caused this man to be born blind or that God was actually punishing this man through his blindness because of something that he or his parents had done. Jesus' disciples probably did think that this man's blindness was some kind of a punishment from God. Now, indeed, during Jesus' time, life was pretty difficult for people who were blind, as well as people who had a hard time seeing. Many times, begging other people for food or money or clothes was really often the only way that these people could support and provide for themselves. They just didn't really have many other opportunities to get the things they most needed. And this was a pretty hard life for these people like this man. You see, Some people refused to give them the things that they asked for, the things that they most needed. And many people looked down on people who would beg others for things. Now, this man who was born blind, he may not have had anyone who could help him get the things that he needed, and he may not have had any friends. He may have been very lonely, and he might have felt left out. He might have felt like he didn't have a place in his own neighborhood or community. But it's in this story that we see Jesus explain the real reason why this man had been born blind. Jesus said that it was not because this man or his parents had done anything wrong. Instead, Jesus says that this man was born blind, so that way God's power and God's love could be seen in this man's life. And then, not only does Jesus say why the man was born blind, that it was to show God's power and God's love, then Jesus himself shows God's power and God's love by healing this man and by giving him the ability to see. So Jesus doesn't just talk about God's power and love, Jesus shows God's power and love. Jesus performed a miracle on this man, and he did reveal how powerful God really is. Jesus showed that God is more powerful than anything that we are struggling with, whether it be blindness or loneliness or sadness or anything else. And now that this man could see, a lot of things would change in his life. He now could be better able to support himself and care for himself. And as his neighbors and other people around noticed how much this man had changed, they likely would begin to respect him a lot more, and they might be more willing to spend more time with him. And as a result, this man might end up making a lot of new friends with all these people who weren't really willing to talk with him much before then. We see how love entered into this man's life in a way that love may not have been in his life before. Now, Jesus wanted this man to know how much God loved him. So, Jesus showed the man God's love. And it was through this healing that Jesus not only changed this man's life, in a way, Jesus gave this man a brand new life. What Jesus did made such a huge impact on this man that it led to the man believing in Jesus as the Son of God. And it's possible that many more people came to believe in Jesus simply by seeing what Jesus had done for this man. You see, if you think about it, if this man had not been born blind, Jesus could not have healed him in the way that he did. But through seeing what this man's life was like before and now after his healing, people could see what a difference having Jesus in one's life makes. After all, they saw the difference that it made for this man. And then they just might want to have Jesus in their lives as well. So what I learned most from this story is that whatever happens to us in our lives, whether it's great or it's awful, God can always use those things for good. In fact, God's word, the Bible, even tells us that that's what God does. In the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 28, it says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love God, who God has called according to God's purposes." We may not always understand why things have happened the way that they have, or why things are the way they are. I don't think that the man, or maybe even his parents, could have really understood why the man had been born blind, at least not up until he met Jesus. But we can trust that just like the man born blind, but who was healed, that God does have a plan and a purpose for our lives. And we can trust that God's plans for us are always good. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me today and hearing my thoughts about our Bible story. I would love to know what you learn from this story, what you take away from it, as well as if you have any questions about it. So feel free to send me your thoughts, comments, or questions about this or any of our Bible stories. You can email them to me, Madelyn Ivy, at MIV, that's MIVY, at stmichael.org. I look forward to getting to hear from you guys, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.